Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my co-host. It's Tom. How you doing, buddy?
Hello, friends.
Tom, good to see you again. Also joining us this week for the first time. Very happy to have him on.
Mhm.
I will make one mention of this and one mention only. Okay, but we would be remiss, and I'll get 1,000 comments if we don't mention it once. But it is Mr. So Hot right now himself. It's Ben Savva.
Hillary Clinton and McGrath still the.
Sorry, my computer just exploded.
That's
like
awesome.
Intro music or something.
Yeah, that's
McGrath Savva for Hillary Clinton.
Stop, Tom. Fix your computer. Or mute yourself. You're killing me. At any rate, hey, Ben. How you doing, man?
How's it going, guys?
It's good.
Pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you, sir. So we are going to be talking about all things Daughters today. And specifically, we're going to be talking about sort of the future of Daughters of Khaine. So there's been a lot of discussion recently as they have popped up in a lot of tournaments. They've popped up at the top of a couple tournaments piloted by our guest.
Maybe. Yeah.
And
Excellent work, Ben.
Sure. So Ben has put out some maximum effort. Ben, how many games into this particular list of Daughters did you say you were? We were discussing right before the show.
I am 38 games with this exact list.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very minor change.
And that is a... No, go ahead.
I was just going to say very minor changes, sort of placing who is having what artifact and what prayers are on which of the hags, and that's the only changes I've made, I think, in 38 games.
Yeah, which I think is like a huge deal.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think this is, you and I were kind of discussing this before the show too. I really think that people overvalue like the list or the army and undervalue experience, and that is something that's an intangible that is worth so much. Being able to really know your rules backwards and forwards, your synergies backwards and forwards, your units' capabilities, your matchups, like that is such a valuable thing on the table. So I'm glad to see you've had the success you had. It's fantastic. And we're going to talk about the future of the Daughters, where they're going, other lists that could be out there on the horizon, all that kind of stuff. So also, we got some news. News first. What do we got, Tom?
We kind of have news.
Yeah, we have. We're gonna shorten the news today because we are going to have a somewhat. We don't have a super long show today. You can blame Tom for that. And
hey,
so
we started in an hour. All of those years ago, Warhammer Weekly was exactly 60 minutes. Now we triple that regularly. So let's be clear: we still do an hour and a half or hour and 15. That's still longer than we started. Okay. Anyways, indeed. Rumor engine. Let's look at a rumor engine because rumor engine.
Is your computer going to freak out again, Tom, when you show us the rumor engine?
I'm still getting used to this whole touch bar thing. We're good.
All right. So Ben, what is this rumor engine? You've got first guess.
Well, yeah, as we were saying before, it's definitely not. It's definitely not Empire, is it?
Nope.
There's no way that they're going back to that aesthetic. Although, at first glance, you do think that is Empire, which is a trap. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's probably something 40k, something to do with Kill Team or Rogue Trader, or Rogue Trader have got a lot of those fancy sort of.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see, there's been like a rumored additional expansion for like Kill Team or whatever that's more Inquisition based or something like that, and or more expansions for Rogue Trader itself with other Rogue Trader crews. Like right now, there's a very specific Kill Team that is a very specific group of Rogue Traders, right? In Alucia Vane and her crew, but there's no reason they couldn't expand that to be like Rogue Traders for Kill Team, right? To have a broader, more generic Rogue Trader Kill Team. And that's what this is. Like, we're not getting our free peoples. Let's put that to the side. And it's like, it's a very specific type of feather, right? Like, it's funny, there is actual very great distinctions in the way that they model the feathers for different armies, right? Like, it's not
It's not a free for all.
Yeah, it's not like a Zinch feather. It's not, you know what I mean? Like all of these feathers have a different look and feel to them. So yeah. Yup, I agree. Tom, any different thoughts from you, or are you on board?
I'm on board. I mean, come on.
I mean,
It's what it is.
Sorry to disappoint folks. For those that really wanted Free Peoples, it's not that.
yeah, they're not going to go back to that aesthetic, are they? When we do eventually get Free Peoples or the human faction, it's not going to be old sort of Renaissance style empire, is it?
No, I would strongly think not. Like, we will get a human faction. Like, we'll get base humans, and in probably multiple waves, by the by.
Yeah,
maybe some sooner than we think.
Right.
I really hope we do get that gold faction. I think it was you guys who spoke about it first. But I
Mhm.
think that's such a good idea. Just a human faction that can just ally to any of the Grand Alliances is just such a good idea. They have to do that.
It just makes sense. It's yes, we had talked about that. We talked about that like a year ago, actually, a little over.
Yeah.
And I like, I know that they had talked about at that time how they were sort of, I shouldn't say talked about, they hinted very much during the discussion that this came out of, that they were exploring those kinds of thoughts in line with the humans. But realistically, that would mean if they then acted upon them, which isn't what they said at all. They said they were kind of, looking at that, thinking about that. That's realistically, min's 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. So from concept to tabletop. So. All right. We have a second thing that happened this week in our light news section.
Indeed. Let me share that one too.
Oh, I'm excited about this one.
So you all are used to hearing Tom's rants. Well, guess what, folks? You're in for a treat today. Vince, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, man. All right, let's talk about this thing. All right, let's talk about this dragon. So this thing finally came out. All right. So, look, let me say the first thing first, okay? A lot of people worked very hard on this. There are artists and sculptors. This is their lifeblood. Nothing of what I'm about to say is meant to insult them in any way. All right? But I am going to give you the my straight feelings on this. This show is about transparency and positivity, but some things I cannot be positive about. This is one of those things. This is a boondoggle. Why? Why does this thing exist?
Vince, what is a boondoggle? Because some of our international guests may not know what that thing is.
Sure. So boondoggle refers classically to a sort of American military spending of like projects that nobody wanted, that just kind of went on. They had a life of their own. They overblow their budget by multiple times. They overblow the time it takes to make them by years. And then when they finally come out, they were 3 times over budget, 3 times longer than they should have taken for a giant thing that nobody wants.
Sure. Okay. So how do you feel about this thing?
I feel like it's a boondoggle. Look, this is cute. This is an artist collector thing. That's neat. Like, it's a neat thing to have. But my problem with it is it's not even that great as an actual, first of all, as a game piece, it's insane. Like, I understand they put rules on it, but 1,200 points and whatever it does, it puts out an average of 20 wounds a turn, 20 damage against a 4+ save. That's the real math. Okay. Sure. Sure, it's very destructive. I don't think that's worth 1,200 points. That's crazy. You can build it into armies. It does not have a base in the box.
You know what else you can have for 1,200 points?
An army.
120 witch elves.
Sure. I mean, whatever. Fine. Yeah, great.
Oh, sorry.
No.
With 2 hags to support them.
Sure. Again, like, all that's fine. Okay.
Sure.
My problem with it is it's cute, but this is like 3 years of work that they've done with Warhammer Forge for AOS. There has to be a better use of time for us. Okay? Like, this is cute, but it's underwhelming in every way. It has that, like, skull acne thing of, like, where the skulls are poking through the skin, which is just the worst aesthetic. 2 of them are, like, if you look at this thing up close, which I've spent a lot of time staring at this thing, like, 4 inches away from it when it's in a case. I actually just yesterday spent more time staring at it just to really solidify my opinions, because I was up at Warhammer World yesterday. And they, like, some of the what placement on it is just mind-boggling. The guy himself does not look great, I think, is what I would say. His axe looks too tiny to be this massive, incredible, amazing thing. both of his hands are weird. His front right claw with his little like brick walking stick cane, it looks ridiculous. His left hand, he only has one finger. You can't really see it, but he's only got one finger. Well, I guess he has like a thumb and one finger. The other things are just a metal like plating over the top where he got fingers cut off. Like it looks like they just didn't. He is frustrating. The texture all over the place is not great. Like you can see the gaps even in this put together example. Okay.
Yep.
So I can't imagine what a nightmare this thing is in reality when I'm sure they spent plenty of time professionally preparing this thing. It's got weird choices all over the model on like what's in it and how it's arranged. And ultimately, even if you love this model and say, yeah, sure, I'm going to drop $600 US. I don't even want to know what this thing costs in Australia or New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
Like on this model that I can't use, that doesn't have a base, that goes on a 210 by 280 oval. Okay. Which is like, that's the recommended size from Facebook. The recommended thing was like, literally go cut yourself a 210 by 280 oval.
Wow.
From an MDF, manufacturer. Okay. Even if you go do that, anybody who's ever wielded a monster on a like 160 mil oval, which is like the pie plate that like the Maw Crusher uses and everybody like that, consider that is bigger than that in all dimensions.
Right.
By not an insignificant amount, by the way. Right?
It's like
that's like
a diorama around the table.
2 inches wider and 4+ inches longer.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does this thing even sit down on a table that actually has terrain?
Right.
I literally can't picture how this thing could ever attack anybody.
You may not even need
never
to
going to
chaff
fit.
it. You may not have to chaff it because it just won't fit between terrain pieces.
It is almost that. Let's say you've got a 12-inch deployment zone.
Yeah.
Okay. This thing is 11 and change inches long on its base.
So it's touching the back at some point. Like it's. Yeah.
That's the real number. Okay.
Yep.
Like and beyond all that, so like the sculpt is underwhelming. I'm sorry. It just is. And the rules are whatever. Nothing is worth 1,200 points. Like I don't know what universe this thing actually makes its 1,200 points up or does 1,200 points worth of damage in an objective based game. Even for like, this is a fun artist thing to collect and put on your shelf. That's what it is. But Smaug is like 100 times better dragon than this. If you've seen Smaug close up, he's gorgeous. That model's amazing. Like for Lord of the Rings, it's absolutely stunning. And yes, it's expensive. It's cheaper than this, by the by. It's a better sculpt that's cheaper than this and looks incredible and is pretty much the same size. So,
Yep.
like, I don't know in what universe this thing is worth its value, but all of that aside, the opportunity cost on this, great. It's done, fine. We can't unmake it. We've blown the time. We had to do this. Like, it reeks of sunk cost fallacy. This should have been shelved at some point and just said, nah, it's never going to happen. But, like, can we now do something real? Like, we could have been making Stormcast shoulder pads, and it would have been a better use of our time. That's like the worst thing they could do is go down the Horus Heresy shoulder pad route, and it would still be a better use than this. I just can't. There you go. That's my rant. I've been thinking about this a lot. Again, I don't mean this as personal insult to anyone who worked on this. But I know that's almost impossible to say given what I just said. I really don't. I'm trying to talk about the thing. Sometimes
you did a great job
miss.
attacking people, Vince.
And, yeah, indeed. Sometimes you miss. This is a miss. I'm sorry.
My question is a very simple one, a very simple logistical one. How do I move this between events?
It's not that big. Like, you could easily move it between events. Like, if you had it on that giant base, you could magnetize it and put it in a tray. Like, it's going to be your whole army. So,
but how do you travel? How do you get on a plane with that?
The same way you do as anything else. It's not the shocking part is it's not that big. Okay, like it's about the size of Smaug. If you can move a whole army, if you're moving an army with 2 Terrorgeists, they're way bigger, or like they're not bigger than this, but like 2 Terrorgeists put together are about like the same girth and much more fiddly than this thing. So like you can move it around. That's not the problem, right? The problem is that like it just it isn't functional as its intended thing. That's what I'll say. All right. I've ranted too long on this, but there you go. Rant over. I'm sorry if you love this dragon.
So who do you think the first person to do a conversion of this is going to be? And what I mean by that is not like make a like stand-in for this, but rather to buy this and then convert it into something else.
I don't know, but here's what I'll say. I realize I got one more in the clip. Hold on. Why is this a corn dragon with corn dragon rules? Of all the just mind-boggling decisions that were made along that led us to this point, we could have made this a generic chaos dragon. So at minimum, 4 different factions, or 5 if you want to count Slaves of Darkness, could buy it. But no, this is like the most limited product I have ever seen you make. It's insane. From top to bottom, it's mind-boggling. Like, that's just a rules decision. You could have stapled this thing with just generic chaos crap. It didn't need to be corn.
Vince, maybe they are in the process of crafting 3 other heroes, because there's no corn symbols carved into the flesh, right?
No, I mean, it's not really.
So maybe they're in the process of crafting 3 other heroes on different looking thrones, that they can sell you additional like alternative versions. So GW, there you can start sculpting that for Forge World for the next year, and try to increase the market on this thing fourfold.
Yeah, let's throw more good money after bad. Yeah, good idea, Tom. All right, let's move on past this dragon before I make this the show.
I mean, I don't really know what else we have. That's it.
That's fine. Ben, did you have any thoughts you want to add on the big corn dragon? I shouldn't jump so fast past it.
I think we're going to see it. I think we'll see it. Blood and Glory. Someone's going to do it. Ben Curry's put it out on Twitter that he'll buy a pint for someone at the beginning of every round if they bring the dragon. I think Tom Maudsley maybe said that he was going to order it right now if it was going to be legal. So I think we'll see it there. I'd be interested to see how it does on the tabletop. I mean, I don't think very well at all, but I would like to play against it and see.
I will say the presence or the possibility of the presence of this thing at a tournament is vindication for anybody that stuck out Zilfin. That's all I'm saying. At the top of 1, because they can't hide this bad boy. So if he's in the deployment zone, he is dead at the top of 1.
Sure. You want to know one of the most frustrating tiny things about this?
Yeah.
It has that like skull in the skin thing that I hate, right? Yeah. I just spent a bunch of time puttying over a miniature that has that. And 2 of them, you can't see it in this picture, but like it has eyeballs. Okay, this dragon has eyeballs on the sides of its head, right? Like predator eyeballs, because predators have eyes, whatever, like forward facing eyes to hunt things, like side front. Okay, on the center top of its skull, right here, like I'm going to take the camera off you so people can see what I'm saying. Like right here on top of its head, okay, it has these 2 skull pock marks where there's like cuts in the skin and there are skulls. So when you look at it from head on from above, it looks like those are its eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the weirdest, again, just like every little decision on this thing is so weird. Anyway. All right. So anywho, let's talk about some pick of the week, man. So that's all the news. Short news segment this week. Let's talk about some pick of the week. Ben, what would you like to share with everybody?
I think maybe the latest, I guess everyone seems to be listening to this already, is the Legends of the Painting Men. But the latest one of those, I really enjoyed listening to that earlier today. And they did a whole long bit about seemingly about their hatred towards metagamers, and a very long segment about how metagamers would just play anything, even if it was just a bunch of clowns with their asses hanging out, that metagamers would play this, and they'd go on for a long time and really put the boot in there. And I was kind of laughing along thinking, this is exactly me. This is if we get to talk about the idea for the Earthwood and the narrative behind that, that's my justification for playing this army, because I had a really good idea for a narrative, and I wanted to explore that. But really, I just wanted to play it because it was really good on the tabletop.
I may or may not identify with that statement.
Yeah, exactly.
They can both be true. It's okay. You can have a great hobby idea and a good narrative, and it can has something that's good on the tabletop. That can all happen at once. It's possible. It doesn't have to all align. It just can. It's not like one precludes the other.
And you get the pleasure of shelving your army every year when that happens.
Sure. It's
After
fine.
they get nerfed.
You know what you're in for. You knew what this was.
Exactly. So you get to buy a new army every year.
No, it's not.
Next time around.
Yeah, absolutely. That's inspiration. Yeah. It's a great podcast. I will definitely link that down below. Tommy, what about you? What's your pick of the week, sir?
Yeah. So Jamie the Jasper formulated apparently today a public list on Twitter, the Age of Sigmar Twitterati, which is composed of 94 members, and I'm going to commend that list to you all. Of
the Twitterati,
the Twitterati, the Age of Sigmar Twitterati, and it's kind of the staple, the most active kind of heart of the AOS Twitter sphere.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a great list to just follow.
Nice.
And
that's awesome. So now we have our own Twitter, like critics talk about how there's like critic Twitter, like movie critics talk about how there's
exactly
critic Twitter and stuff like that. Okay.
Yep. So I'm going to commend to our audience the Age of Sigmar Twitterverse.
The Twitterati.
The Twitterati. Well, the Twitterati, and then just the Twitter scene itself. If you're not involved, come hang out with us.
It is very positive. What I will say is like some people talk about how like they have bad experiences on social media or whatever. I find my social media feed, especially Twitter, to be the most relaxing thing ever because I've called it specifically that I just follow, AOS people who share AOS thoughts and fun and models and stuff. So like loading up my Twitter is just a wonderful, relaxing experience where I get to see everybody's wonderful painted models and talking about going to tournaments. And I get to see Chuck work out every day. I mean, that's basically what my Twitter consists of. He's over here in the UK as well. He's like a couple of blocks away from me where he's staying, ironically. But he's up in Nottingham today. So there you go. All right. So for mine, I have a fun video from a friend of the show, 2 Plus Tough, who has a great video he just put up today that I really liked called The Rise of Destruction. And it's all about sort of the future of destruction in AOS and in the narrative and in the lore. And there's been a lot of people I know who are like calling for sort of more destruction focus. We know that next year there's probably going to be a fair destruction focus. And so 2 Plus basically goes and tries to chart that out, like read the tea leaves and determine where the narrative is taking them. It's a really cool video. So since we're talking about the future here anyways, I thought it was completely happenstance that he put that up today, but I watched it and I loved it. So check it out. If you're a big Destruction fan, obviously there's a lot of rumors swirling right now that Destruction may be getting some love very soon and into 2019. So go check that video out, and I will link that below. All right. So let's talk about some hobby time, guys. Ben, what's on your table, man? You've got your army. You've got your 38 games in. What are you working on now? Or like, is anything on your table, or what are you painting?
Yes, yeah. So I'm still not ready to fully announce yet or like kind of launch, but I've been commission painting for the last couple of months, and hopefully I'm looking to turn that into working full time and earning my living from that. So I'm working on a strange commission at the moment. Actually, it's for a club mate of mine called Alex, who got a huge army commissioned, and you've probably seen it because it was all over the internet, by GMM Studios. He got a Stormcast army done, where the the big centerpiece was Archeon with 3 Star Drake heads, and he got all the old models done. And obviously, since the new book came out, those old models are garbage, and no one's going to use them. So he wanted to get all the new models all added to it, but as I understand it, GMM Studios has a very long waiting list. So I'm basically doing sequiturs and evocateurs to add to that army, but copying Brandon's style. I've got some of the models on my tabletop, and I'm trying to make that as close as I can possible, which is a really, really interesting process. Actually, I'm really, really enjoying it, and I'm really, really learning a lot. It's yeah, it's really it's like there's a lot of sort of writers who swear by sort of writing down that I think Hunter S. Thompson used to write down Hemingway's stories so he could learn the way the words, and Brendan's obviously a super talented painter, and I'm learning a lot painting that. So it's strange, but it's really good. And it's the first time painting Stormcast. Really enjoyed them. Fantastic. So
that is totally awesome, man. And I agree. Like, it's funny you made that. I was going to make the same literary reference. I swear to God Almighty. Because people who ask about like getting better at the hobby and at painting, it is one of the things I would tell people to try, which is actually like pick a fig and find a style you like that somebody has done and try your best to copy it, right? Like, you shouldn't try to copy all the time, but or all one person, but you should like find different artists you like and try to copy them and see how well you can mimic what they're doing, because there's a lot of stylistic differences, and exploring how they're doing what they're doing will help you understand how to do a bunch of different things better and find your own style. So that's super cool, man. I love that.
I'm doing the same thing with Vince's bases right now.
So Tom, is that your hobby time? Is that what you're working on?
It's funny. Things have been kind of crazy on my end, and so I've taken a break this last week. So this is the first time I put paint to brush to model in a week, with Holy Havoc approaching swiftly. And so the question is how much of my sideboard am I going to get painted? That's the question we go into next week. And so I've been working on my Canary a little bit here, a little bit there. I don't think I showed pictures last week, so let me see if I can do a share real quick. I thought I had it open. And then I have another little treat from our event that I'm going to share with everybody. I don't want to show your stuff. Oh, well. Cool. Well, let's just ignore that.
We can show Ben's stuff here, too. If you have Ben's stuff teed up, we can go.
I do have Ben's stuff teed up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my stuff, and then what we'll do is we'll jump into Ben's stuff. How's that sound?
Sounds good, man. I've locked on you.
Okay. So here are my my Canary that I'm working on. So, and they're coming along. I'm just doing lots of glazes. I'm getting tired of glazes. I want to be done.
You never get tired of glazing, man. It's always fun.
I am so tired of glazing.
How long are they taking you, Tom? Because mine were taking like 4 or 5 hours or something. They're so fiddly to paint.
Yeah, I mean, I assembly line paint mine, as you can see, so I like do all of them together, and so it's hard to gauge the entire unit's time investment because I just work kind of en masse for all 10 of them. And so I do one step across all 10 models, and then I do the next step across all 10, and I move in that sequence. So it takes me a while. I mean, there's just no other way around it, but it's going well. Like I'm happy with the wings, how they've come out. It's making me excited to tackle Marathi. Because she'll be on my table here in a couple weeks. So yeah, I'm working nice and slow. I don't have any major events, so yeah, it'll be good. So that's where I'm at with these girls. They're fun. And then here's the treat for our event coming up. Is that we reached out and had a friend sketch the symbol on for that was similar to the Daughters of Khaine one, is obviously we weren't going to use copyrighted stuff, like their actual images, and so and this is what we did. So we have Daughters of Khaine dice now. Booyah. And I'm excited because it matches our color schemes very well.
That's so well as well.
I'm very happy with.
The question is, do they roll well? Have you rolled them and checked how they roll?
They do. I like it.
Okay, good.
Just re-roll everything. Don't.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm excited.
Re-roll everything all the time, so who cares? It's all fun.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, somebody like Rob or somebody said, just re-rolling. That's the game we play now, re-rolling, right?
Right. Pretty much.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll see a lot of those crushed hearts.
So my hobby time is, here you go. I'm obviously on the road right now, so I'm working on nothing. But I'm working on a big project that I'm not going to talk about till it's done. I turned in my other secret project I couldn't talk about to only start another big secret project that I can't talk about So, well, that I can talk about, but I'm choosing not to. And I'll talk about it once it's done. So there you go.
Not the one you just turned in. I didn't see that one, but the one that you're working on right now that you can't talk about is amazing.
It's gonna be pretty good. I'm pretty stoked.
And if you thought I was critiquing Vince's or the ability to take that stupid dragon to events, I don't know how Vince is going to take this thing to events.
You'll see. Anyway, do you want to bring up the pictures I sent you of Ben's army? Because as we transition here into the Daughters discussion, I want to take a moment because we're going to spend time talking about rules and stuff like that.
Yep.
And Ben is obviously a great player who has come top in multiple tournaments in a row with Daughters and performed well with them. But it is often, people who win a lot of tournaments often get accused of underperforming in the hobby area, of not being a hobby champion. And I would just like to say, I just want to show what an amazing all-around player, participant in this hobby Ben is with his incredible army, because it is gorgeous and absolutely just, it blew me away from the first time. I think I remember way back when you shared maybe your first conversion around this, and it blew me away from minute one, man. And to see you bring this all home is great. So, I mean, we can sort of, if you just want to cycle through a few of the pictures, and Ben, if you just kind of want to talk about your inspiration for it and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I have to look on. I have to go and see him.
Can you guys see me? See the Marathi up?
Yeah, that's yeah. So the idea is from the Erstwood. The first army I collected was Sylvaneth when I got back into the hobby a couple of years ago when AOS dropped. I created, I started a Sylvaneth army and sort of came up with the idea for the narrative based around the idea of this place in the realm of shadow called the Erstwood. And the name came from the sort of the idea erstwhile, as in, old time and forgotten. And that's sort of how Warhammer was to me then. I hadn't played in 15 years, and I was getting back into it at a time I was doing a lot of writing as well. And I just sort of wanted to build an army that had a story, and that story's continued to develop over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, I sold that army now, the Sylvaneth army, but this is sort of the next iteration of it. So the color scheme is the original one was lots of blues and whites, and maybe not as much contrast here, but this this was the effort to sort of do that better. The reason I sold the army is because it was the first one I'd done in 15 years, and I felt like I could do much better, and I was sort of just waiting around for the right aesthetic to appear in order to sort of do that justice, I guess. And when the Daughters of Khaine video dropped, I knew straight away that this was going to be it. I knew I had all the old Sylvaneth parts lying around that was left over from that army, so it was just a case of integrating them all into the aesthetic. So if you can't really see it in this picture, I think there is another one, but
if we can scan forward a little, Tom, there you go.
Yeah, so it's all, everyone has sort of Sylvaneth aspects to it, and I cut all the eyes off here, so you got this really sort of just Taureau Pan's Labyrinth kind of those girls, and then these hands, I'm pointing at the screen, no one can see, but the hands I kind of use the Spite Revenant ones because they can double up then in my head as either bladed bucklers or as as daggers, depending on what they need to be there. So that was the idea for using them. Then I could just sort of chop and change the units. And I think unfortunately I don't know if there's any pictures of the witches. That was the hardest part, was getting 30 of the branch witch branch in farms. And I think now if I went back, I'd probably build the witches with shields. I think they're probably better with shields than they are double daggers. But
that's an interesting insight. We can talk about that here in a minute.
These guys. It's just such a gorgeous army, man. You really delivered on this. It's absolutely wonderful. I have to be honest about it.
I have to be honest, Ben. I'm actually going to steal part of your Marathi conversion here.
I think you're stealing the cowled head, are you? Or
I am stealing the cowled head. gonna do a different set of wings than the ones you did, and then I'm actually gonna take and reposition the arm like Steve Herner did. I don't know if you saw Steve. You've seen Steve, but he messed with the elbow on it and like rotated it so the spear's sitting up and she's leaning. It looks like her weight is leaning on the spear. It's a really interesting, fairly easy like reposition.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna do a combination of your two conversions because you guys like I love both of what you guys did.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, go for it. Yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, that was just. I really wanted to get rid of those bladed wings. I hated those bladed wings.
Yep. Yep.
They are my least favorite part of the model as well. I'm with you on that. Yeah.
Yep. They will not be on mine.
Yeah.
All right. So, Ben, this is such a fantastic accomplishment. I love the color palette. I love the desaturated nature of it. It feels like it lives in shadow.
Yep.
Right? Like,
Yep.
It really does. That's what you nailed. It feels like an army from the realm of shadow, where sort of the life and the color has been sapped out of it.
Yep.
It's great.
Yeah.
While still maintaining a very high contrast. So it's really just it's an A+, man. It's an absolute home run of an army. From vision to execution to on the table, you're basing everything. It's great.
Oh,
So well done.
Thank you very much.
All right. So now that we understand that Ben not only has the hobby chops, but he's also got the gaming chops. This man's taken tourneys. This is the Daughters expert. But it's a unique thing because we rarely get to have a situation where everybody on the show plays the army. And yet here, all three of us have this army. So this is a rare, unique, and fun occasion to discuss this. So I thought we'd start out by just sort of covering the current state of Daughters. And basically what we think that is. Is it, in fact, the best army? There seems to be a lot of consensus gathering around that it is the current army to beat or best army or whatever, that it's number one. Obviously, there's a data set out there to support this to some degree. The data set is not huge, but it's, it's not small either. And, the Daughters have quite a winning match percentage in this. And they have a very, they pretty much have earned the top slot, depending on how you slice the data. So, look, Ben, I want to throw it over to you first. What's your feelings on the current state of the Daughters of Khaine in general, both like how you see them, how you think the community sees them, etc.?
Well, I think I think people have spoken before about the production meta, and it's going to take a certain amount of time until armies get onto the tabletop. And I think in the case of Daughters, that amount of time has been longer than other armies because of how many bodies there are, how difficult it is to batch paint flesh, maybe the cost of the army as well has slowed people down. So I think, yes, we're seeing a lot of Daughters at tournaments at the moment, but I think it's because it's just now that people are starting to finish their armies. Like, I've been working on mine solidly for the last 6 months, and it's only now it's sort of being finished as well. And so I think that because they're appearing a lot over the last couple of months, there's still a lot of people who haven't played against them.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you play against a new army, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose horribly in most cases. And especially if you don't know what the army does. If you bought the battle tome or you built some list yourself and you have a vague idea, then maybe you know what you're up against. But the last 2 tournaments I've gone to, I'm still playing players who haven't played Daughters. Right. And I think if you haven't played an army like Daughters, it's going to walk all over you, and you're gonna have a really bad game, and then you're gonna come away from the tabletop saying Daughters are completely broken, they're completely overpowered, and I think that's what we're hearing a lot of now. But the players who in those games that I've played in the last couple of tournaments, the players who have played them before, I'm having much closer games. I would say 4 out of my 5 games at Angel Corps were really, really close, and 4 out of my 6 games at the GT final were really, really close games because people understand them. And it's the same with every army, with Change Host and Vanguard Wing and Fire Slayers and KO were all doing so well until people understood how to beat them. And I think now we're just at that cusp where people are starting to understand, but there's still too many people who haven't played them, who are getting their asses handed to them and going online and complaining about that.
Yep.
Well, and it's especially strange with the case of Daughters because it is such a it's such a like synergistically powerful list, right?
Mhm.
That is to say, like many of the lists rely on a lot of like actually quite finicky and careful interactions. And by the way, I don't want us to people be like, oh, bunch of Daughters apologists because they all play it. Of course, they all come down saying, oh, they're not really that good. I mean, I think they are really that good, by
Yeah.
the way, right? Like I think they. I don't want to get into like an exact argument of like, are they number one or something like that. I would not disagree with the statement. They are one of the best armies in AOS. I think arguing over number one is fruitless because I don't know how you ever could get into
I don't even know what that means.
Right. I don't know what that means exactly.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything useful to me. But like saying they are one of the best, I think is a sensible statement that I could get behind. But it does rely on like a very discrete set of careful synergies being properly executed. It is not just like a turn, click, kill army, right? It's very, very different than running something like, I spent a lot of the past year running Iron Jaws, and like both are very offensive melee focused armies, right? But they're a completely different experience on the table. Like when I play my Daughters, I have to play so much more carefully and tactically and make sure that like my distances are all correct, that everything is exactly where it needs to be, that everything is exactly sort of touching everything else in the right way for not only where I am now, but where I'm going to be after charges and after, my opponent goes, and I have to remove casualties, like I've got to constantly be thinking about how these distances are going to shrink and change and move to gain like a maximum output from it. And what I think happens is when you have a player that knows it really well and knows how to actually exploit that, which I'm not claiming I am, but I think somebody, Ben, like you are, because you've put in the time, right, to learn that. And you bring that combination of a synergistic power army up against somebody who doesn't know how to then hit the weak points, right?
Yep.
That's where it's going to feel like, you're just getting punched right in the teeth, right? So, I think that's a big challenge. There are definitely weaknesses to exploit, and we're going to talk about what would we see as the future here. What do we think is going to change? Because I think there are some things that I would see if I had my druthers, I would change about the army.
You're saying with like an raw?
No, I just think as time goes forward, I'll talk about what I think is likely, and then what I think if I could just sort of like wave a magic wand and make it happen, we'll kind of talk about all that. Sure. But I think that on the whole, the army's like really well designed. It's one of the best sort of overall design efforts where everything is pretty good. And when used right, it becomes really good. Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest changes for me, like obviously the army was in AOS 1 when it dropped, it was immediately apparent that this is the best combat army in the game now. And that is probably still true. And the sign of a good army is that it competes in every phase. And I guess now with the transition to AOS 2, a lot less armies are competing in the shooting phase. So that's kind of become a bit more redundant.
Which is good news for this army on all the levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because if KO was still around and being able to pick off all those buff pieces, then that would be shutting down the army's main strength straight away. But I think the biggest change for me from AOS 1 and what makes Daughters so good now is actually, I think, the command ability at the double and the ability to always guarantee being able to move that 6, because obviously most of the Daughters units can run and charge, and the ability to be able to guarantee that means that your movement is so much more reliable, and you can always like you're almost always going to be using, or I am anyway, going to be using the command points to spend on those 6s, and you still get the chance to roll for it first. But being able to definitely move those 12 inches means the Daughters has gone from an army which is fast but unreliably fast to always being fast, always being able to be in the right place at the right time. And as many people have said before, AOS is a game about movement. You win games because of movement, and Daughters got so good at that because of that command ability. And that's why I think that's why they've gone from what was a really, really good combat army to what is an army that's winning a lot of games and a lot of tournaments now, because of well, I don't know about how everybody else is playing, but for me, that change means they compete so much in the movement phase that, and then they're so fast in the movement phase that you don't even need a shooting phase because you're in combat when you need to be, and then they're just so good in combat that you're just, you're dominating those two phases really.
Yep. No, I totally agree. We mentioned it during the Beast of Chaos show, right? Because a lot of the like sort of Brayherd style units have the same ability, and how like you need to think of their movement as often being 6 inches higher, and it's well worth understanding here as well, right? Like those witches, pretty much when you need them to, they have a base move of 12.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's just the reality of the thing. That's a very fast unit.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned,
is
you're
reroll
getting...
ones on charges as well. Like, by turn 2, your reroll ones on charges. So that 12-inch move and reroll ones on charges suddenly becomes really scary.
Right. And as mentioned, you get to roll the run first, right? Before you decide to blow the command point. And you're rerolling ones on the run from moment you start the game.
Yep.
Right. So like you're always avoiding the worst case. You're getting a free shot at the best case. And you can force the best case if you need to. Right. I actually think we'll talk about it later when we talk about snakes some, but I actually think that that's one of the major things holding the snakes back from being, as good as the witches or whatever, is the fact that they can't run and charge by default, right? Whereas the witches and the sisters can. It's like, it's funny because you don't think of that as being such a crippling delta, but I think it is huge in the end. Despite the fact that the snakes can do a really hellacious amount of very good damage, especially when, like, if they receive the same buffs, like we'll talk about this a little bit later on too, but like obviously one of the big potencies of the Daughters Army is that it's, and you've mentioned this on other shows and interviews you've done, is that it's not, because it's synergistically reliant, there's sort of this core set of buffs, and they can be kind of picked up and lifted and shifted to, like, they go on unit A this turn. Now unit A goes and does something, and then unit A is killed. And now I'm going to pick them up, lift and shift them, and now they're going to be on unit B. Right? And like, I lost the unit, but I didn't lose any of the buffs.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think when you put a lot of that same power onto the snakes, they get incredibly scary. The difference is they don't have that same ability to reach out. Despite having a higher base move, they have a much slower, in reality move, as it were. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Which makes all the difference. I played a game against Nick Thompson at the GT final where he had two big units of 20 snakes, and that it just felt like my game right from the off. One mistake that I made, one small mistake in turn 3, and he could have won it, but I knew that I was going to be the one making the charge. I could stay out of his range, but he couldn't stay out of mine. That 4 inches makes all the difference, I think, with those two units.
Yeah. It's about the same delta as like back in old Warhammer Fantasy when you had a cavalry versus an infantry army, right? Like it's about the same amount of distance difference, and again, it makes the difference. All right, so let's get into some individual stuff here. Okay, real quick, we're gonna set a couple baselines, because before we talk about other units and other things in the future, I feel like it's important we tackle the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Okay. And that is this 30 block of witches, which has become the shorthand for like just a busted unit or whatever, right? Like everybody talks about this thing like it's just sideways the unstoppable behemoth that is the 30 block of witches, right? And it's funny because when I hear people talk about the 30 block of witches, they always talk about it like this. This is how 30 blocks of witches get described, right? At least when I see it talked about. Tell me if you have similar experiences. Well, it's a 30 block of witches, and they're making, 4 attacks a piece. They're re-rolling all their hits. They're re-rolling all their wounds, and they're on, they're on a normal save if they've got their armor save, and then they're on a 5-up re-rollable feel no pain save, right? I believe that's how they normally get described. But what doesn't get said in there,
and Battle Shock immune,
yeah, sure,
and -1 rend, 2 damage apiece.
Yes,
right,
absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go. Yep.
Yep.
And what's not getting said there is that there's like the presence of 5 different synergies that could be lacking.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And there's a lot of prayers that might not have went off.
Sure. Now you can guard against that. I mean, you talked about that in the interview you did with Dan with AOS Shorts, right? Which I would like if somebody wants sort of a master class, which is what Dan names his episodes, on how to run that. You really broke down your individual tactics and how you think about it there well, and obviously the use of like the Shadow Stone and the prayer. What is it?
The Iron Circlet.
Thank you. Yeah, the Iron Circlet. The name was like out of my head. To re-roll the prayers, which I completely support and agree with. Those are the two I called out from the beginning.
Yep.
Tom and I have been on this page for a while. Because
in general, I'm not as much of a fan of the Iron Circlet. I like the Griff Feather Charm on the Cauldron, but I understand the desire for the Circlet.
Yeah,
I'm a Circlet man all the way, but I get it.
I know, I get it.
Sure. At any rate, because you're minimizing the chances of duffing those prayers, but nonetheless, those are all things you could not have. So I thought, what do you think about the 30 block of witches as the big boogeyman right now, right? Like, how do you think about it? Let me put it this way. How useful are 30 witches unbuffed? Let's ask that question, right?
Not. I mean, I think not very useful at all, really. Like, I mean, yeah, 120 attacks is a lot, 4 attacks per model, but you're never going to get 120 attacks. It's the same with skeletons, like skeletons in a unit of 4, you have 120 attacks, but you're never going to get them all in, especially in Daughters. They're going to be strung out across, strung out back to the Cauldron and back to the other buffs. And so, just their base profile is 3 up, 4 up, and that's it. There's no rend, there's no extra damage, there's no re-rolls. And that's when all the buffs are on them, they become that blender, they become this killing machine. And those buffs are reliable, they're fairly reliable, they're even more reliable when you're running Shadowstone and Iron Circlet. But they're not guaranteed. They're not like things like Endless Legions and High Tide and Blood Tithe and any summoning point system are things that are guaranteed every turn. So you can build a strategy around them because you know that they're going to happen. Whereas all those buffs going on to witches, any one of those could fail, or it could be unbound. Inevitably, even with the Iron Circlet, you roll that 2 every now and again, and that completely changes that whole unit. You know that they can't take that hit then, and that completely changes how you use them. And so, yes, they're really, really strong, but they're strong because they've got all the buffs on, and those buffs, if they don't go off, you don't use the witches in the way that you would. If they didn't have Blessing of Cain on them, for instance, I wouldn't run them forward. Probably, I'd sit back and wait until the next turn. And so you are limited. You can't build, as I say, you can't build strategies around them with things that that you're guaranteed to get. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, they're good. Yes, Daughters, and yes, the Daughters buff engine is incredible and probably one of the best in the game. But yeah, I mean, it's the same with any unit. And where you put that, then you can put down a unit of 5 life takers, and they're going to turn into a killing machine.
They are.
Oh boy, we'll talk about life takers when we get into the
yeah, Ben, that's what I want to hear.
We're going to have some fun life taker discussion. Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's you look at things and you gotta break down to the pieces. I think we mentioned it earlier, but one of the things that are certainly benefiting Daughters is the absence of sort of point click shooting removal.
Mm-hmm.
Which may or may not change. Who knows? That's a thing that's shooting is already sneaking back into the meta in some very different ways we're seeing, and whether or not enough of those lists, become critical mass enough to threaten. But the ability to remove, say, the general and shut off the Hagnar 5 up, right?
Yep.
Or the ability to remove the the critical Witch Brew doesn't have a super long range. You know what I mean? That sippy cup doesn't exactly. She doesn't exactly toss that thing like a football from across the field, right? She got to be fairly close on that sippy cup. So the ability to point click remove your hag, right now is largely absent in the meta, and Daughters are certainly reaping that benefit. But I'm not sure that rides that could change based on nothing being done. Other than the meta shifts, a new army comes out, it has more. Shooting that makes it more potent. The meta itself shoots back to have more, tilts back to have more shooting. All of those things could very much change the power of that army. Because if you remove the Witch Brew, and suddenly the unit's not rerolling wounds and not battle shock immune. If you remove the general and they're on like a 6-up save, even a 6-up rerollable, right? Which I don't know who that's. If the hag and the cauldron are dead, I'm not sure who's casting that prayer at that point. But let's assume you've got a different hag farther away who threw the rerollable prayer. Like, that unit is suddenly drastically different in performance, right?
Yeah, they're losing an attack each as well. If you've taken out the hag and the they all lose an attack, so they're probably not going to be within 7 inches of the Medusa because she's sitting at the back of the field. They lose +1 bravery, so even if you are getting Mind Razor off, they're only bravery 7 now, so you're very rarely getting that double damage. You're losing the +1 save from the cauldron, so they're 6-up save followed by 6-up rerollable if you have the second hag, which I don't. But yeah, you lose so much from taking out those characters. And then I think, you know, if there were armies in the meta that were able to do that, then there wouldn't be so many horror stories about witches, because witches wouldn't be doing all the things that they're doing now because the buffs would be gone.
Right. Yep. It's you know, on a related note, I've wondered if we're going to see more people exploring more interesting synergistic Khorne armies, because Khorne has a lot of these same abilities and their heroes aren't getting removed in the same way anymore as well, right? So I wonder if there's not like some people who are going to start kit bashing together various Khorne lists do the same, because they can function in much the same way. But anyway,
I was playing an amazing Khorne list at the GT. I played in game 5 and it was really, really clever. Loads and loads of little tricks. And yeah, I think the lack of shooting Khorne could definitely be top tier, I think. No.
Right. Yeah, because they rely on a lot of the same stuff, right? Like those same principles can be applied within Khorne as well. Okay, so we like, nobody's going to say a buffed up unit of witches isn't good. I'm not going to try to sell you that. That's a, you know, obviously no. They're one of, if not the scariest combat unit in the game. Like when they're all buffed up, my God, it's a nightmare. Like they'll shred through just about anything you put them against, right? But that isn't like a free thing, right? That is something that is ironically almost happening because of a lot of things that are outside of that control. But for now, it's pretty powerful.
That said, can I just make a little addendum?
Sure, man.
I feel bad, just to put a capstone on witches. I feel bad for anybody trying to play 1,000-point tournaments right now.
Okay.
Because like in a 1,000-point tournament, you can get like 3 blocks of 90, you know, like 3 blocks of 30 witches and the hag support that they need.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like,
I don't know. Like,
and we've talked about this. Like, yes, I think there are actually better lists than what I just trotted out. But what I would say is that 1,000-point games right now are a really brutal space to play in, because there are a lot of haves and have-nots in the meta right now.
Sure. I mean, I trotted you out a Skaven list. I think that I would take that one to the cleaners, but that's fine. You're putting an awful lot on a single hag. That in that case, I'm going to dump everything into removing and watch all those witches suddenly become like mildly okay infantry.
Sure.
Right, because they're just buffless. Like, enjoy your re-rolling ones, you know, the turns you get it.
I think
okay.
I think the distinction is that the witches, 30 blocks of witches, aren't winning games for Daughters. That's not why they're performing. That's not why they're on the top tables, just because of 30 blocks of witches, and the hag as well. Obviously, is more of a. I think more people complain about the hag than they do the 30 block of witches.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's the distinction to make, is that you know, Daughters aren't winning games because of that unit. It's because of the rest of the synergy of the army. Because, well,
yeah, I agree exactly. That's just the visible. That's the symptom, right? But that's not actually the disease. To put it in the wrong terms, like I don't want to make it sound that has a negative connotation, but nonetheless, that's not. You can't just rely on that alone, right? Within a 2K list, that's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
It is the synergy. It is the total picture when it all comes together.
And actually, the winning lists, like your own, Ben, have not had 3 blocks of 30.
No, just
like that's what's being trotted out in most of the lists that I've seen, and the lists that I am running are not 3 blocks of 30, because there's just too many other useful tools in the army.
Yeah, exactly. And the buffs can only go on to 1 unit, so I think the second unit is almost unnecessary, really. I mean, unless 1 unit dies, but Hagnar, it's not dying very often either, you know, that unit. So you don't need. I just don't think you need the second block.
Sure. All right, so let's talk about what else in Doc has potential that hasn't been explored yet. Let's assume for the moment that some things change. Maybe some future changes happen with perhaps witches or perhaps hags or perhaps some of the more common tools we see right now. Let's talk about what else in Doc has potential that maybe hasn't been explored because everybody's been focused on the bright shiny. So we mentioned life takers right up front. So let's talk about life takers, which are obviously the life takers are your melee version of the more commonly seen heart renders. I mean, at this point, life takers are like the second rarest seen unit in the army, I suspect. They only probably occasionally show up when they're the tax in like
Cauldron Guard.
Cauldron Guard, yeah. Thank you.
I would argue they are not attacks, but go on.
Sure. No, I'm absolutely with Tom. Yeah, I just wrote a list with 20 of them in yesterday, which I think is
yes.
All right, so hold on.
But don't ruin this for me, Ben. Hold on, Vince. Don't ruin this for me, Ben, because you're going to go and take it and win a tournament with them before I get here.
Absolutely. I think it's a really, really good anti-daughters list as well that I wrote yesterday that's got a unit of 20 of them in. So that's what I'm building for next. But yeah.
All right. Do you have a single unit of 20 or is this multiple units?
It's 2 units of 10, probably.
No, I was thinking of 1 unit of 20.
Oh, okay.
You get the discount.
All right. So because Tom has been trotting out, like in all fairness, I know the joke, there is the existing joke on the show that Tom has written all the best lists, right? That like every time somebody trots out a list, Tom's like, "Oh yeah, I wrote that list like forever ago." And like, "Okay, Tom, we get it. You write a lot of lists." But in this case, I will defend Tom because like forever he has been trotting out this 20 block of life takers to me. Okay, like I'll go pull the chat messages if people want to see it from months back because it all gets logged. And where he's like, "Yo, man, I think these 20 life takers, I think it's got gas in it. Look, if we do this and this," and I'm like, and my constant response is, "You're out of your mind. They're not good. They're just like they are ridiculously fiddly and on 40 mil bases, and like I enjoy slow playing your game, trying to even get them into position." And even when they're there, they're like gonna sometimes just completely do nothing and die because they've got to be so out of position.
You're just so negative, Vince.
Right. But first of all, since you're on this train, apparently, Ben, I'm shocked. I'm shocked and appalled. But nonetheless, you want to disabuse me of my incorrect notions here of why I'm wrong. What do you like about the life takers in this case?
Well, I think, if we're discussing what next for Daughters, like what other units are being and not being or are being underused, is everything other than witches, really. And I think, as we've discussed, the power of the army is all those buffs going onto something. So you put all of those buffs onto a unit which is 2 attacks each, still 3s and 4s, so exactly the same as witches.
You're saying the heart renders.
The life
takers, yes. You're saying the life takers are 2 attacks, the same profile as witch elves. Yes. Continue.
Yeah, base. Yeah. So then 3s and 4s. They don't have any rend, which is a bit disappointing. If they had 1 rend, they'd be really, really good. But they're 1 damage each, which goes to 2 on the charge. So then you put the Mind Razor on them. They've got their -1 rend now. And then if they outnumber something, they're bravery 7, they're bravery 8 if they're stringing back to the cauldron. Then they're 3 damage on the tarts.
It's so good.
Yeah. If you're in Hagar and it's turn 2 if you've got Sacrament of Blood, or 3 if you haven't, they're re-rolling all hits. If you've got the Witch Brew on, they're re-rolling all wounds. I think you get 40, like on their 40 mil bases, you can just they're 16-inch move or 14 or 16.
They're
14 inch, I think. 14-inch move. So with the new scenarios now, everyone being 18 inches apart, you're looking at 4-inch charges in the first turn. You go in, you've got maybe you're not going to get all of them in because you're going to be stringing back for some buffs anyway. But you're going to get a lot of attacks in there doing potentially 3 damage each at -1 rend. That's could do a lot of damage first turn. It could easily clear out all the chaff screens anyway. And then on a 4-up, they can just retreat 6 inches away and not get hit back. And then there's just a massive roadblock there in front of the enemy. If they're in combat, they go up to a 5-up save. If they're near the cauldrons buff, they're a 4-up save. So even if they are in combat, they can be on 4-up, 5-up, 5-up if you put the defensive buffs on them. And they're reflecting the mortal wounds back on 6s as well because they have the bucklers too. So
let me push back and say that, like, I think that there's another piece of this that you're not thinking about. So you're saying that they're a huge roadblock out there, right?
Yeah.
So like you hit in, you clear all the chaff, and then you float back 6 inches. Now they're gonna come and move up and just blow them off the table, right? Well, what's gonna happen is they're gonna come in maybe with their whole army and hit, or multiple units. They're gonna get one of those units to hit those Canary, and then you're gonna hit back fully buffed and potentially float back 6 more inches and pull all of their units back out of combat.
Yeah.
And let's say that they completely eliminate the heart rate or the life taker unit. You've lost 270 points, and you have the rest, your other 1,700 sitting behind them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, and the other half of this is if Hagnar bites the bullet, like if Hagnar is done, which is a possibility, like depending on how it gets FAQ'd and what nerfs hit. These girls in Draking and Eth are hitting on 2s.
Sure.
Because they're charging in with the +1 damage, with +1 to hit and +1 to damage.
Yeah.
Well, and we should state you can still get these into a battalion. We mentioned it earlier, but they are part of Cauldron Guard. So you could even have this big block as part of a Cauldron Guard, which generally has other valuable
+1 run in charge.
Exactly.
+1 run in charge is what you're going to get in Cauldron Guard. And with, like, again, obviously the ubiquitous cogs that we always talk about. If you could fit cogs in with like a Marathi or something else with +1 to cast, then make it semi-reliable. Those girls are like charging on +3 to charge, +2 move. So they're going to get anywhere that you need them to be first turn.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would never bank on the cogs, but I don't.
No. I'm not saying you bank on it, but what I'm saying is that it's fairly reliable. Like, not fairly reliable. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it, with them in Cauldron Guard, with the movement buff, with everything, you create in them a mobility that is. There's very few things that are going to be jotting around or jumping around the table with that speed, and then it can also pull out of combat.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The
float is powerful. The float is dead. Like, their float away out of combat, I cannot disagree, is like truly one of their most powerful abilities.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous how insulting that is when you nail it. Right? They're skinks who get to fight first. But the trade-off is you only get to do it.
In our 3 damage each.
Yeah. Like that is a super good ability. No doubt.
And then they always have the option to just deploy in the air as well. Like, I think with the Cauldron Guard list, I mean, my list at the moment is 5 drops, which outdrops everything apart from Sylvaneth and the odd murder host that you still see around. So if you know you're going to take in the first turn, and you can always have the option of just dropping them. If they deploy too far back and you're not going to make, like a 4-inch charge, you can just drop them in Cauldron Guard. That that's an 8-inch charge with a command point reroll. There's a good chance you can get them in any way through just placing them down on the board anywhere they want to be.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
All right. Well, you may have changed my mind, but I still want to see it play out. We'll see. I'm not fully on this life taker train yet, but we'll see what happens. Let's talk about snakes for a minute, because the snakes are some of my favorite models, and I think the melee snakes. When I think of the Daughters army, I think of an army that fights well in waves, right? Like you have kind of your wave 1, wave 2, wave 3 set up as the buffs roll onto the different units, right? So you crash forward with a unit. Maybe it dies, maybe it doesn't, and then you bring in your second wave and you bring in your third wave. I think especially as you think about the turns and how that's working, people often underestimate when you turn all those buffs and like laser focus them onto like a Slaughter Queen on Cauldron or something, or on Marathi herself. I think people underestimate just how BSC those things become. Like nobody contemplates how destructive Marathi herself gets when she rips into combat form and then eats all the buffs and then goes hog wild. Or the Slaughter Queen on Cauldron, who, like, both of those units are just, I mean, they power per square inch is insane on them when they're fully buffed, right? Because you mentioned like not all the witches getting in. Guess what gets in? That one model, right? Like it's in. But like I think the snakes are a good wave too, and I like the melee snakes quite a bit. We mentioned the limitation of the run, but what's your general feeling on them? And why are the shooty snakes the worst thing in the world? Why are they truly like, I mean this in the most generous sense. I love those shooty snakes as models. They're beautiful models. Yeah. But man, they are like spotting a rare white elk. Like maybe a couple people who've decided to pay the temple nest tax for reasons I can't contemplate. But like these things are just, I don't understand them right now. What are your feelings on the snakes in general, Ben?
I think the Bloodstalkers, the shooty ones, they don't have, there's no list that other than a temple nest list, as you said. There's just no use for them. That's one thing that isn't going to be explored. I think as we move away from witches, and hopefully people start doing other things with the buffs. There's lots of interesting places that you can put them, as you mentioned, Marathi and Cauldron Guard. I think they could be really the buffs could be really good on warlocks as well if you have them in big enough numbers.
Yeah.
Unit of 10 of them, man. But the Bloodstalkers are just like I'm spending a lot of time at the moment trying to write lists that are not, for one, not Hagnar, and for two, kind of contemplating what nerfs are going to come into effect. And I wrote tons and tons of lists in the last few weeks because I've played so many with this army, and none of them have included Bloodstalkers. There's just no use for them. I can't see any use for them whatsoever. So yeah, I feel nothing about them. They're terrible. Even
I agree.
It went down to like 100 points. I don't think I would still use them at 100.
If they were 2 attacks a model at 140 points, 2 attacks a model, there might be gas.
Yeah. But yeah,
and
one attack, and you can't even even their pinging, sixes exploding into mortals doesn't work in the shooting phase. There's not even like clever little combos that you can do with Marathi and big units of them because they lose that ability anyway. So
yep. Yeah, they're just like from the ground up, they're not doing the role that they seem to be designed to do, right? Like they're not actually shooting support for this army. Like if you wanted shooting support, if that's where you were going, just take the stupid Doomfire Warlocks and get their crossbows going and and buff them because they can also go do stuff in melee and also cast a pretty decent spell. Yeah. Right? Like these girls just for the points they're at, they don't accomplish anything. And I agree with you. Even if they fell by 50%, I still don't think they'd be doing anything of real value in the force. It's a shame.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because it infects my favorite battalion. Like I love the idea of the Temple Nest Battalion. I even like the buff of the Temple Nest Battalion. Like I think the ones on to hits are pretty sweet. Even though there's plenty of people who reroll ones to hit, but it's certainly useless in the mirror match. But nonetheless, I think it's a really cool ability. And yet I would never take that battalion because I'm not paying that shooty snake tax. That's a crazy tax. That unit's so expensive.
Yeah,
for just nothing.
And 2 that you have to take. If you had to take 1, that'd be okay. But for 2, like 320 points, yeah.
That's a lot of your army to put into 10 pretty bad bow shots.
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah,
that's rough. Like statistically, out of those 10 girls, you get like 1 mortal wound and 1.2 damage or something around
for 300 points.
Yeah, that's woof. That math is not great, right? And that's not shooting it like a hero where you've got negatives to hit. Like, oh god, there really falls off. Just
yeah.
All right. So as we're getting toward the end here, because I know Tom, you don't have a lot of time left, I want to talk about the future of Doc. We've mentioned it a couple times. Hagnar has sucked up all the air in the room, and it's funny too because I really don't like Hagnar. Okay, like I mean, that is to say, I understand completely why it's powerful. Between the rerolling all hits and moving the Feel No Pain to a 5-up.
Yeah, it's like I feel like I'm playing Nurgle again. It's awesome.
Sure.
That can actually hit back.
Yeah, I mean, it just the problem with it is it certainly is better than the other 3.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, I will defend Drakey Ganeth until I die because Drakey gives me like all Drakey forces on me as an artifact. And I love the +1 to hit on the turn you charge in. I think when combined with Slaughter Troop, it gives you an unbelievably versatile set of tools. Okay. And I like hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. I think that's a pretty fun thing to do. But the problem is Hagnar is just like, it's hard to weigh anything against Hagnar right now.
Yep.
So does Hagnar need changing? Let's ask that question straight away.
I think that buff needs to go to Holy Within, doesn't it? I think that's the answer there.
It needs to be 14 inches Holy Within. I hate to even say that. I don't want to articulate it, but it's 14 inches Holy Within is the right.
Exactly what I wrote down as well. Yeah, 14 inches is there's so many of the other buffs in the army are 14 inches as well. Like I think that would make sense.
Yeah. I would sadly
that would
tend to
drastically
agree.
reduce its potency. Yeah.
Yep.
Now it's annoying. Like the problem with it is, I hate that that's even the case, right?
Yeah.
Because like this army is already pretty fiddly to play, and like measuring wholly within buffs and a thing like that gets so annoying. Just slow play time wise. You know what I mean? I wish there was some other thing. Like you know what? Honestly, I wouldn't mind it if they just took it back to formula and said, well, let me ask you this question, okay? Let's flip this on its head. You mentioned the prayer that gives you the rerollable feel no pain, right? Okay. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Blessing of Cain? That was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Apparently I could remember it. Is Hagnar a problem if Blessing of Cain doesn't exist?
No, not anywhere near as much anyway, because in those turns when you like so much of how you play each turn is dependent on that roll. That's the most important roll of every single turn, and inevitably, even with re-rolling ones, you see that 2 come up, and like on average in a 5-turn game, you're probably going to see that once a game, and often it's more than once a game. And that completely changes how the army plays. It not having that, you can't play anywhere near as reckless. You can't set up, such good castles. You can't just throw things forward and string back in, knowing that they're still going to be there the next turn. So I think, if you lost Blessing, then that would probably be just as effective, maybe if not more, than changing it to Wholly Within.
Yeah. So unpopular opinion time. I want to see Blessing of Cain get jettisoned. This is my wave of a magic wand thing that I talked about, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is getting into unpopular opinion territory, especially as somebody who plays Doc, because I get it. It's stupidly good.
Yeah.
Right. But that's just it. Like sometimes you got to break your toys to really, get a better overall experience. And my answer is the army should have never had that defensive tool to begin with. Right. It's not an army about defense. And our witches shouldn't be. Right. It shouldn't be, our witches shouldn't be on a level of toughness of like that Nurgle looks at and is jealous of.
Yeah.
Right. Our main thing already broadcasts old school Mystic Shield. We can already take the feel no pain save from 6 up to 5 up. Right. And basically get that sort of demon style save. Having it rerollable is just being greedy. Like if I could wave a magic wand, I wouldn't change the Hagnar buff, and I would just erase Blessing of Cain from existence. Yeah. And I think that would fix most of the problem. And then we can still go on with our lives. And, like daisy chaining has its own risks, right? Because there's plenty of things in the meta that can like snipe out a dude and then kill part of your unit, right out of the middle and stuff like that. So you're already paying some cost by daisy chaining.
Yep.
Yeah, you pay 10 or 12 witches to go back there as well. And if you put all your buffs into 10 or 12 witches, that's like however much damage. That's a lot of damage that you're making a choice there to go back to keep them defensive.
Yep.
And to keep all the buffs intact, you're losing. Yep. Like you have 40 attacks at least.
Sure. So yeah, I mean that's my answer. Blessing just needs to be stricken. Like I know that's not going to probably happen, which is a shame. But in my perfect world, that's the simple solution to this. Like it immediately makes the other temples more interesting because you can't get that 5 up rerollable. Like weighing just a 5 up, right? A 1 move on that against something like what Drakey gives suddenly becomes a more interesting comparison, right? Now I don't know that none of these are ever gonna make Crake pretty good.
Yeah.
Like that's still the loser next time.
Yeah.
Calibron has its own interesting balance. Like Calibron is benefited by shooting coming back into the meta, right? That's what makes Calibron worth it or not.
Yeah.
Right. If suddenly shooting becomes like the thing again in some way, Calibron suddenly its stock rises dramatically, right? Through no rules change or anything like that. It's completely meta dependent. Yeah. If there's no shooting, Calibron sucks. If there's lots of shooting, Calibron's good. It's that easy, right?
Gonna come back soon.
Yeah, I would suspect so. So it'll take care of itself. All right, let's talk about some points changes. This gets discussed a lot. If there are any points changes in this army, up or down, what are they in your mind? What would you like to see, think you'll see, etc.?
I almost don't want to suggest one for the hag because I think that they should be 80, but I know that lots of other people are shouting 100 or 120, but I think 80 is enough for what they do. I think witches probably need to be the same as sisters, maybe 120 and then 300 for the 30. I think that Bloodstalkers need to come down just so that people can play Temple Nests without having such a high tax. They'll still be useless, but they need to come down by at least 120. And to be honest, I don't think there's anything else that sticks out too much to me. I would say maybe Marathi could come down slightly, but that would be unpopular as well.
I think you nailed the exact 3 I was going to say, and at the exact points levels. I think Hags at 80 is correct. I think that like.
Do you think that we'll see a change to the actual witch brew ability?
I don't know. Like, again, let me say this. I think Hags at 80 would be perfectly fair, especially if Blessing of Cain didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
because what makes Hags problematic is them rolling around on a decent armor save with a 5-up, 5-up, and a built-in neg1 to be shot.
They're never going to be the unit that you target for the rerollable 5-up. But what you will see, though, is you will see, like, I think Hags at 80, and I'm going to get crucified by the rest of the Witch Elf or the West of the Daughters community. If there is a nerf to Witch Brew, it's going to go one of 2 ways. Either it'll go to once a game,
which I wouldn't want to see,
or it will it'll go to the unit will be wholly within 7 inches of the witch, of the hag.
I mean, couldn't you just make it like Orcs? Couldn't this go just an Ironjaw direction?
And make it to the end of your turn rather than at the end of the
so they're not battle shock. Yeah, they're battle shock immune and are rerolling wounds in your turn, but then outside of your turn, they're actually susceptible, and people can counter against you.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Like that feel like if you're gonna nerf Witch Brew, that feels like the way you should do it. Like you give them the sippy cup, they're jazzed up for the moment, and then it wears off. I mean, that's basically what the story is in Ironjaws, right? Like so. You know, I don't, whatever. I mean, it feels like that'd be a perfectly fine way to do it. But yeah, I like Hags 80. I like Witches at 120, 300. I don't know why they're cheaper. Like, because I don't understand. They seem like they're not worse than Sisters in some way. Like, those are different but equivalently useful units in my mind.
They're doing different things, but they're still as useful.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in your list, Ben, you had what, a 30 of Sisters, a 10 of Sisters, and a 30 of Witches, right?
Yeah, 30 witches, 30 sisters with bucklers, and then a 10 of sisters with knives and whips.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I'm sure you use those to different ends because they have different sort of purposes, right? And how you deploy those. But I think of them as pretty equivalent units in like amorphous power. Right, like they feel like they're about the same. I don't know that one is worse than the other, quote unquote, whatever the heck that means. Right?
No, yeah, they're the same. They're the same basic stat line, and once they have all the buffs on, they put out roughly the same amount of damage. You know?
Yeah, I agree. All right, Tom. Any other thoughts on points? Is there anything else you'd move around? By the way, I definitely agree on the snakes. Like. Bring the snakes to 120 or 100. The shooty snakes.
I would drop them to 100, honestly. That's me. That's probably not a popular opinion, but because then maybe 120. 100's too aggressive because of the heart renders are at 80 for 5 wounds, and so you're getting 10 wounds out of these.
Sure.
So
heart renders wounds are completely irrelevant. That's not what they're there for. Heart renders are there.
Well, it doesn't matter. But like I'm looking at comparing the two things and what you're getting out of it. Sure. So the other thing that I would say is I would love points wise I wouldn't say anything else. What I would say is that I think that warlocks have been underexplored by people.
Oh, I'm hopefully going to be bringing them to Blood and Glory if I can get them in 10 days, and I've got a horrible plan for them.
I have a 10-man block that I'm converting right now. So, yeah, they're really there's a lot of potential there, is what I would say.
Yeah, especially in Hacknot as well.
Yep.
All right. So then, let's see. Let's knock out a couple last questions here. What we mentioned shooting would move them in the meta. What else do you think will move daughters around in the meta? Like, what would be their nightmare scenario that would happen? Like an army that would release, or something else that would change the way they play.
I think something that could shut them down in the movement phase. I don't know how they would do that as a mechanic, but I think a lot of the power, certainly in the way I play them anyway, a lot of the power is in their movement and their ability to get onto objectives. And I think that would be an interesting army anyway. We've said forever now that AOS is a game about movement. I've said it twice this show already, and we haven't really seen a lot of armies or even lists designed around shutting down other people's movements. And that's something I'm starting to explore. I think Daughters can do it quite well, actually. But if an army came out like that, something that could just shut them down, and not just like with chaff walls, but like just shutting them down and keeping them in place. Perhaps more spells that like the death have, or halving movement, halving charges. Like, I think those things are horrible when you get them off on it. I'd rather have the -1 to hit or the -1 attacks any day than the death spell that means you're only charging on 1 dice.
Yeah, or the new like hailstorm spell, or is that what it's called? I don't know. Whatever, the one that the Shaggoth casts, right?
Yep.
That halves your moves, halves your runs, and halves your charges.
Yeah.
Talk about
Legion of Asgore has one as well, Ash Cloud. And so like there's a number of things out there and I think Shackles even does as well. Because
the problem is with Shackles, you will definitely spend the spell to remove the shackles.
Awesome.
Right?
And And if they don't have the spellcasters to like, then is it biting into one of their their mind, the person that would be casting Mind Razor?
Yeah.
Sure,
okay.
Yeah, I understand. I get it.
Marathi with Mind Razor. Like, I've seen a lot of lists that don't even have the Medusa, and if you've just got Marathi with Mind Razor, I mean, if you obviously can keep her small and do 3 attacks, but if you want to transform her and then you've got to dispel her shackles, you're not casting Mind Razors. So
right,
sure.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I wonder how the things that I wonder the most about. Like, I think of what might be contained in like a Moon Clan or a Goblin release if that happens. I have no idea how that will interact, because that army just seems like a complete tabula rasa to me, right?
Right.
Like, that is to say, like, it could just. Like, if it's a bunch of squig heavy stuff, it could be insane random movement that doesn't get pinned down and goes all sorts of different directions and gets in the way. And, so who knows? Could be interesting, could be not. I have no clue.
Yeah, even fanatics, like the heavy reintroduction of fanatics into the meta really changes what charges look like for witches. If they're trying to control your combat.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Moon Clan could even the idea of expanding things like nets and and fanatics. I think they could be an army that could potentially do that. Could control the movement phase a little bit more, which would be really interesting. Yeah, and I think that. I don't know whether it's an idea, as I said, like, I don't know whether it's an idea that's been explored. I don't know whether too many people have thought about building lists that control the movement phase, that try and dominate in that phase. And I think if you can in an objective game, you could shut down a lot of armies and a lot of, win a lot of games because of that, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a real wild card for me upcoming. And then the second big question I have on the horizon is Slaanesh, right? Because if there's anybody who's known as like the speed kills army, it's always been Slaanesh, right? So like, I am very curious as to what the heck Slaanesh is even going to be, because like right now, I've occasionally played my demons of Slaanesh over the past year, and all I feel like I'm doing is playing bad Daughters of Khaine, right? Like, that's all it feels like. It's just like, oh yeah, this is a worse version of that other army that I play, right? So like, if it's gonna stop being that, then what is it? Like, what does it do? Is it can't be just that, but more, right? Like, we're even faster and even more whatever, like, well, geez, like, they're already just on each other, killing each other, both are just picking their fights every time. I don't know what that looks like anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's the other big question mark in my mind as to what happens there. But yeah. All right, Ben, any final thoughts you want to share on the future of Daughters of Khaine? I think that right now they're strong. I think we'll definitely see some adjustments, but I think that they'll remain very viable. There's a lot to explore here, and I'm very interested to see where the Daughters go over the next 6, 9 months, 12 months. I think it's going to be a lot of interesting, different lists showing up.
Yep.
Yeah, I think what I'd like to say is just just play games against them. You know, like I think there's so many people who are just moaning about them at the moment, and people even on podcasts who just seemingly haven't played enough games against them. Like I think that they can be beat, and they can be beat quite convincingly if you know how to play against them. And so, you know, instead of just calling for nerfs and you know, like let's change points and this kind of things, just learn to play against them. You know, like I think that's, you know, like you just pick up the battle tome, read through it, build some lists, see how they fit together, and then go and play games against them. You know, like I always do that myself. You know, when Vanguard Wing came out, when KO came out, when, you know, like all of these big lists, you know, like the Ideneth. I've never lost to KO. I've never lost to Ideneth because I buy the book and I sit and read the book and go through the army and figure out how it works. And then when you're on the tabletop, you've got an idea of that, and then you don't get destroyed, you know, so thoroughly. So that's what I encourage people to do. Just find someone who's playing them and play some games. Once you've played them once or twice, you're not going to be getting beaten anywhere near as horribly, and you might even win, you know. So I've spent a lot of time painting this army, and I don't just want it to get the Zinch treatment, and next year I can't be. So.
Everybody's afraid of the Zinch treatment.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. All right. So, Tom, any final thoughts from you, sir?
Nope. I think there's a lot of potential. I thought that from the beginning, and I still think there will be even after the first round of nerfs.
Yeah.
I think that there are a few things out of whack, but I think on the whole, the Army's in a good place and will continue to be so. What I'll say in advance is whenever changes happen, and they will come in some fashion, that's the nature of this thing. The people who are playing Daughters, you know, I would hope, don't freak out, don't lose hope. There's still plenty more to explore. Let's be like Ben. Let's all be like Ben and start exploring those things now and have fun, so that way we can keep, you know, figuring out what's good here. So, all right, I like it. All right, sir. Well, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, buddy. I love talking about my favorite murder girls with you.
Thank you. No, it's been a pleasure. It's really enjoyed.
All right. And to all of you out there, we thank you very much for watching. As always, it is greatly appreciated. Ben, we'll definitely have to have you back on the show in the future, perhaps after some Daughters changes come down the pike. We'll talk about, maybe we'll have you back then and we'll talk about that, or maybe we'll talk about whatever army you pick up next, and we'll go that direction. But as always, we appreciate you watching. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks, guys.